In the shadows of a dying empire, when marble pillars cracked and ancient eagles crumbled to dust, one man dared to dream of Rome reborn. His name was Belisarius, the last great Roman general, or perhaps the ghost of an empire that refused to die. Imagine the world in the 6th century. The Western Roman Empire had long since fallen, its legions shattered, its emperors forgotten. Yet in the East, a single flame still burned in the heart of Constantinople, where Emperor Justinian ruled from the golden halls of the great palace. The city was alive, mosaics glittering under torchlight, priests chanting before altars, and spies whispering secrets through the marble corridors. For Justinian, it wasn't enough to rule an empire of memory. He wanted to restore Rome itself. And to do that, he would need a sword forged from loyalty, brilliance, and silence. That sword was Belisarius. They said Belisarius never lost a battle. They said his eyes could read the field before blood ever touched the earth. Some said even the Vatican's secret annals, those forbidden archives beneath St. Peter's, contained records of prophecies naming him the chosen general, destined to revive the empire of the Caesars. Whether truth or superstition, his legend became too large for the mortal world. But legends have a cost. When Belisarius rode into battle, he carried not just the weight of Rome, but the paranoia of his emperor and the envy of a court built on treachery. Our story begins in the year 532. The streets of Constantinople are on fire. The Nika Riots, one of the bloodiest uprisings in Roman history, have torn the empire apart. The blues and greens, once chariot racing factions, now wage war against the throne itself. For 5 days the city burns. The mob cries out for Justinian's blood. Even his closest advisors urge him to flee. But from the chaos steps Belisarius, tall, composed, his armor reflecting the flames like a mirror of wrath. With a force of mercenaries and disciplined troops, he marches into the hippodrome. What followed was a massacre. 30,000 rioters slaughtered beneath imperial banners. Belisarius saved Justinian's throne that day, but in doing so, he sealed his fate. For emperors love heroes until they no longer need them. Music suggestions slow, haunting strings rising into drums, the sound of destiny forging itself in blood. Now that the capital was safe, Justinian turned his eyes westward to reclaim what had once been Rome's glory. The first target, the Vandal kingdom of North Africa, a land that had once been the empire's breadbasket, now ruled by barbarian kings. It was a gamble of faith and fortune. The treasury was near empty, and the seas were dangerous. Yet Justinian sent Belisarius, with only 15,000 men, to conquer an empire. The Vatican Archives, though shrouded in secrecy, are said to contain fragments of correspondence between envoys of the Eastern Church and papal scribes in Rome. Some whisper that Justinian's ambitions were guided by more than conquest, that within those hidden vaults were references to the lost prophecies of Daniel describing the revival of the fourth beast, the Roman Empire. To Justinian, this wasn't mere war, it was divine mission, and Belisarius was his chosen weapon. As the fleet set sail, the Mediterranean stretched out beneath them, a sea of ghosts. Every island they passed had once flown the Roman standard. Now it belonged to another. For the soldiers aboard those ships, it must have felt like sailing into the past itself, to reclaim a dream already lost to time. When they landed in Africa, the Vandals were unprepared. Belisarius struck with precision, discipline, and deception, the art of Roman warfare at its peak. At Ad Decimum, his forces divided, then reunited like the hand of fate closing around the enemy. Within weeks, Carthage fell. The impossible had happened. The Roman eagle flew again over Africa. The people cheered, the priests chanted, and Justinian's name was praised in every sermon. Yet, in the secret councils of Constantinople, jealousy took root. Whispers spread Belisarius grows too powerful. Music suggestion. a slow descent of choir voices, victory stained with unease. Some later chroniclers hinted that after Africa's reconquest, certain relics were found, relics that vanished soon after being sent east. Among them, supposedly, was a sealed manuscript bearing the mark of the old Roman Church. Could this have been one of the so-called forbidden Gospels? The Vatican denies it, of course, yet even today no record of that shipment exists in any imperial log. But Belisarius was no scholar, he was a soldier, bound by loyalty. When called again to war, he obeyed without question. Next, Justinian ordered the invasion of Italy, to reclaim the eternal city itself from the Ostrogoths. The campaign would be long, brutal, and filled with betrayals that would define the twilight of Roman power. As the fleet prepared to sail once more, Belisarius stood on the docks of Constantinople, watching the setting sun. He had won glory beyond measure, yet he sensed the shadows deepening behind him. And in those shadows, the ghosts of Rome whispered, of triumphs that would be erased, of loyalty that would be repaid with ruin. Because in Justinian's empire, the closer one stood to the light, the darker the shadow became. Italy, once the heart of civilization, now a graveyard of empires. When Belisarius landed on its shores in 535 AD, the land that had once been the beating heart of Rome lay in ruin. Gothic kings ruled from decaying palaces, and the eternal city itself was a ghost of its former self, its temples silent, its forums abandoned, its aqueducts broken. Yet to Justinian, this wasteland was sacred. Reclaiming it meant restoring God's chosen empire. The campaign began with lightning victories. Sicily fell without resistance. Naples surrendered after a brutal siege, and then the impossible. Belisarius entered Rome. After 60 years, the city that had once ruled the world was once again under Roman command. But as the people knelt before their liberator, he did not smile, for he knew that the Goths were coming. The siege of Rome that followed would become legend. The Ostrogothic army, nearly 100,000 strong, encircled the city. Belisarius had barely 10,000 men. Inside the walls, famine spread like plague. The Tiber ran red with blood. Yet the general stood unbroken, orchestrating defense after defense with terrifying brilliance. He turned ancient monuments into fortresses. The Pantheon became a bastion of archers, the Colosseum a shield of stone. When the Goths tried to storm the gates, boiling oil rained from the battlements. When they tried to starve the city, Belisarius used secret tunnels beneath the ruins, feeding his men and striking at night. Rome became a labyrinth of ghosts and shadows. Music suggestion. Low, tense strings, echoing with the distant sound of thunder and bells tolling in the night. But while Belisarius fought for Rome, intrigue poisoned Constantinople. Empress Theodora, the most powerful woman in the empire, distrusted him. Her spies whispered that the general's victories would make him emperor. Letters forged by jealous courtiers accused his wife, Antonina, of treason, and some claimed even Belisarius himself plotted to seize the throne. The Vatican Archives, according to later rumor, hold copies of intercepted letters between Roman priests in Ostrogothic lands and agents of Justinian. One fragment, written in cipher, supposedly refers to the general who serves the empire of heaven more than the emperor of earth. If genuine, it might explain why Justinian began to fear the man who had saved his crown. As months turned into years, the siege dragged on. Disease consumed soldiers and civilians alike. The city's saints were said to weep blood. Belisarius, exhausted and half-blind from illness, prayed before the tombs of the apostles. Rome is eternal, he is said to have whispered, but its masters are not. Then, in a stroke of genius, he struck back. In 538 AD, his forces broke the siege, routing the Goths and reclaiming Italy for the empire. The impossible had been done again. But when messengers carried word to Constantinople, Justinian's praise was cold. The emperor feared that the general's glory might eclipse his own. When Belisarius returned home, he was not welcomed with laurels. Instead, he found his enemies waiting. Whispers became accusations, wealth confiscated, honors withdrawn. Yet even stripped of command, he remained loyal. When rebellion flared again in the east, Justinian called him back, and without hesitation, Belisarius obeyed. Some chroniclers later suggested that Belisarius had uncovered something in Italy, something never meant to be found. Beneath the ruins of an ancient basilica, his men reportedly unearthed sealed documents written in Greek and Latin, older than the empire itself. The manuscripts vanished soon after, supposedly sent to Constantinople, then to Rome. In the centuries that followed, whispers claimed they rested deep within the Vatican's secret archive, hidden among forbidden gospels and apocryphal prophecies that questioned the very foundation of divine authority. The Vatican denies this, of course. They always do. But history is written by those who guard the keys, music, suggestion, choir voices rising in minor tones, mystery deepening into revelation. Years passed. The empire faltered again. The Persians advanced in the east. The plague ravaged cities. Once more, Justinian turned to his old general, and once more Belisarius answered the call. In 541, with no reward and few men, he rode again into war. He fought not for glory, not even for Justinian, but for the idea of Rome itself. In one campaign, he single-handedly saved the empire's eastern frontier. In another, he crushed internal revolts with the same ruthless precision that had saved Constantinople decades earlier. Yet when he returned to the capital, tired, scarred, and still loyal, he found only betrayal. The emperor stripped him of command, dismissed his officers, and left him to live in quiet disgrace. It was said that Theodora feared his shadow even in her dying years. A shadow too loyal, too capable, too pure for an empire drowning in corruption. And yet, rumors persisted that deep within the palace, Justinian kept a secret codex, a personal chronicle of his reign. Some historians believe that the original still lies hidden, locked away beneath the Vatican Archives, transferred centuries later when Constantinople fell. If so, it would contain not just the secrets of an empire, but the truth of Belisarius's final years, because soon the story would turn darker still. The man who had reconquered half the known world would be accused of treason. By the emperor he had served faithfully for 40 years. The year was 562. The empire stood at the edge of exhaustion. Its coffers drained, its armies thin, its emperor aged and suspicious. And into this world of paranoia and decay stepped once more the man who had given everything for Rome, Belisarius. He was old now, his hair silver, his once strong frame worn by decades of war. But his eyes, the same eyes that had seen Africa, Italy, and the East, still burned with the quiet fire of loyalty. When summoned to the palace, he came without hesitation, unaware that this time he would not be leaving as a hero. In the shadowed corridors of the great palace of Constantinople, courtiers whispered. A plot had been uncovered, a supposed conspiracy to overthrow Justinian, and at its heart, they claimed, stood Belisarius himself. The emperor's guard seized him, stripped him of titles, confiscated his property, and placed him under arrest. The charge was treason, the one sin Belisarius had never committed. Music suggestion slow, mournful strings, the sound of wind echoing through marble halls, the fall of a titan. Some sources claim that during his imprisonment, Belisarius was kept in near darkness, interrogated by priests of the imperial chapel. Others say he was blinded, a punishment reserved for traitors. The story spread like wildfire, the great general reduced to a beggar, sitting by the gates of the city he had once saved, crying out to strangers, "Give to Belisarius whom virtue hath blinded." It became a legend, retold by monks and chroniclers for centuries, an allegory of loyalty betrayed by power. But historians debate its truth. Some Byzantine records suggest he was later pardoned and lived quietly until his death. Others hint that the story was deliberately exaggerated, a moral fable crafted to warn future emperors. Yet in the Vatican's shadowed vaults, that vast, silent labyrinth beneath St. Peter's, there are said to be letters that tell another story, letters written by a Roman priest, smuggled from Constantinople after Belisarius's arrest. One fragment, marked with the seal of the Lateran, speaks cryptically of the Codex of the General, sealed in the name of the Lord of Hosts. Some believe this refers to a personal chronicle Belisarius kept, a record of his campaigns, of the treacheries within Justinian's court, and of the hidden motives behind the emperor's wars. If that chronicle ever existed, it vanished, and yet traces remain. A 15th century catalogue of the Vatican's restricted section lists an unnamed Byzantine military codex, acquired after the fall of Constantinople in 1453. No description, no author, only one word beside it, De Falev Imperatoris. Could this be the lost writings of Belisarius? Or perhaps Justinian's secret history, the emperor's own confessions, never meant for mortal eyes? We may never know. Music suggestion deep, echoing choral voices, a requiem for forgotten glory. After his disgrace, Belisarius fades from the chronicles. One line, that he died quietly, faithful to the end, but silence is the cruelest epitaph of all. For centuries, artists painted him as the blind beggar, general, a symbol of virtue punished by envy. Philosophers saw in him the tragedy of loyalty in a corrupt world. And in the hushed halls of the Vatican, among manuscripts bound in human skin and sealed with broken wax, some whisper that even the church mourned him. Because Belisarius was not merely a soldier, he was the embodiment of Rome itself, eternal, loyal, betrayed, yet unbroken. His story forces a question, one that echoes through time, through marble ruins and golden cathedrals alike. When empires fall, what truly dies? The realm or the honor of the men who served it? Even today, within the Vatican Archives, beneath layers of stone, guarded by silence, there may lie truths that could rewrite this tale. The secret chronicles of Justinian, the lost codex of Belisarius, the prophecies that once declared Rome eternal. But they remain sealed, locked away behind iron doors that no historian may open. Perhaps because the truth is not what we imagine, but something far darker. Music suggestion, orchestral swell rising to a haunting fade, violins and choir in minor harmony, the sound of memory itself unraveling. And so, when you walk the streets of modern Rome, and the ruins whisper with the voices of the dead, remember the man who gave everything to bring that empire back to life. Belisarius, the last great Roman general, forgotten by emperors, buried by history, but not by time, because some names never die. If you found this story haunting, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with those who love the mysteries of history. Tell me, do you believe the Vatican still holds the lost chronicles of Belisarius? Or are some truths buried for a reason? Join me next time as we descend once more into the shadows of unsolved history,